Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Haynes. I'm an audiobook narrator, and this is a peek in the process of authors that I work with. Our guest author today is Mary Yungeberg, and she's a novelist of the Rowan Milani series. I had the pleasure of reading a sample of her work, and you can check that out in a previous video that I've done. But we are now going to interview her about her process because I am, I'm enjoying sharing a peek behind my curtain, but I have not necessarily interviewed authors very heavily about what goes on for them. And after years of narrating audiobooks, hey, why not? So, welcome, Mary.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Mary, first of all, let's just get just a general synopsis of the Rowan Milani books.
Okay, well, the first is there are five books in the Rowan Milani Chronicles. The first is Consummate Betrayal, and it talks about Rowan is a decorated FBI agent, an Iranian American who loses his fiancee in the North Tower of the World Trade Center on 9/11. That starts kind of a cascade of events. He's tapped by the president to do some very secret, off the books black ops while maintaining his career. But the other side figures out that it's him,
Hmm.
and they present him, are able to influence the intelligence agencies in our country to believe that he's a double agent.
Hmm.
So he's pursued by both his government and the terrorists. And the second book is Unholy Retribution, and he's determined to get even for the things that have been done. He's going to create his own justice, his own brand of justice. Well, they're going to too. He ends up in a bad place. And the third book is A Different Man, which he's determined he wants to do. He wants to change course. And then Terminal Redemption is kind of a continuation of that journey. And then The Man Behind the Shadows is he's on a totally new course, a new direction. And I'm working on number 6,
Hmm.
which I've tentatively titled something along the lines of One Hellacious Reckoning.
All
So we'll see.
right. Now, of course, a man being in this kind of field and also being sort of stuck between two sides of the coin has characters by necessity coming from all over the world and also him interfacing with a lot. Um,
Correct.
with so many options, how do you decide which characters from which region to interface with him? Does it start with, I've always wanted to write a character who is, for example, like from the sample that I read from Chicago, so I'll stir him in that way. Or does it start with, I think the kind of situation he should find himself in is this, thus a character from here would be needed.
Well, gosh, that kind of gets into the writing process. When I started, I researched so much. There's so much to research. Ended up with Rowan having a boss who was a special agent in charge and who happened to be a former SEAL, Navy SEAL from Kansas City. He has a good friend, Chad, who is one of his compatriots or colleagues. He meets a woman that he just falls for instantly. It's an instant attraction. So if I'm getting off track here, I'm trying to think where I wanted to go with this. So bringing the characters from different regions, different areas, gives them, where you're from gives you a unique perspective. So my main desire was to create characters that were three-dimensional, not just cookie cutter people, but that people could relate to. So if you know somebody that's from Kansas City that grew up there, kind of Midwestern, that twang in their voice, their history, but he's a Navy SEAL, so you research that
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
in his former life. And I know a lot of military people, so I was able to get some insight into that. Um, the character that is after him is an Egyptian national that's a pretty highly networked in the Muslim Brotherhood. So I've read tons and tons and tons of information about different people in the Muslim Brotherhood and their backgrounds
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
how they talk and what their interests are and what their um, um, how they pursue things,
Hmm.
how they view things, and then you work to be as accurate as you can in creating their dialogue. And I mean, the whole thing. I mean, it all kind of becomes a big rolling snowball, that
Yeah, yeah.
um, it was easier for me. One of the main supporting characters, his love interest, I guess you could say, that I made her a veteran of the airline industry who wanted to get out of it, and I can understand totally why. You know, um, and I don't know if that's making any sense.
No, totally makes sense. When you're writing their dialogue, do you find that does your research yield certain expressions that they use, or certain rhythms by which? I mean, do some speak in longer sentences while others are more terse?
Right, more abrupt.
Yeah.
Yes, when I started writing, I found a book by David Frey titled How to Write a Damn Good Mystery.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he talked about building characters.
Hmm.
So each character, it takes a lot of time and it's really tedious. You decide what their complexion is going to be like, what their hair color is going to be like, what their
Hmm.
eyes are going to be, what their parents are. Did they go to school? Do they have siblings? Where are they from? How did they grow up? Do they like to surf? Do they like to play basketball? When is their birthday? I'm not big into astrology, but you can use some of those things to
Hmm.
create, that month, the fun is fun stuff. So I made each character that way, and their names have meanings to me also, which are just kind of subtle. Other people may not get it, but two of Rowan's closest cohorts are Michael and Gabriel. Well,
Hmm.
they're always the ones rescuing him. So in my mind, I did that because Michael and Gabriel are archangels. So they'd surely be looking out for him, right? I mean, it's little dumb things like that, or maybe they're dumb to somebody else, but to me, they have meaning. And they
Sure,
just
sure.
added sort of a subtext that sometimes people figure out, and it's kind of fun for me to put that in there.
Hmm.
So the only name I screwed up on is Rowan. And that's just, I don't know why. I would have sworn on a stack of Bibles that was an Iranian name. Why, I don't know,
Hmm.
but I was sure of it. And then not too far into the whole thing, I figured out that it wasn't, but it was too late to change it. I already had the first book, and I thought, my God, how did I do that? Well, then I got to looking at, so what does the name Rowan means? Well,
Hmm.
it means red it's a Celtic name, but it talks about the Rowan tree and the characteristics of the Rowan tree.
Hmm.
And those characteristics are kind of the foundation of his character. So that was kind of cool in the end,
Hmm.
but it was a big boo-boo that these things happen. And anyway, so that's just but I feel like using different areas of the country where they come from does give people a different perspective. That gives the characters a different perspective. And I wanted them to be very individual. So certain characters say certain things and other characters don't say them, because otherwise they all sound alike.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean that's something that is kind of is fun, and something that I track as a narrator, when a writer, for example, is writing dialogue versus narration.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes the dialogue, especially if a character is unpacking a story that happened to them, still sounds like literary narrative, as opposed to the rhythms of somebody talking about what happened. Usually, I find well, there are all sorts of things, but it's just something that I normally would take for granted, but now I'm learning more and more about how these things are, especially when I'm giving them voice. Speaking of things that sometimes get taken for granted, readability and ease by which to get engaged in a story, turning the pages and such.
Mhm.
Do you find that there is a pretty heavy process of boiling down your text for easier readability, or do you find that it launches into place a lot pretty quickly after you've done your research?
Once I've done my research and can actually start writing, then it goes pretty smoothly.
Mm.
But although I can bang my head against a wall lots of times too, but um, what I've found is that when I step away from it for a couple of weeks and then come back, and especially if I
Mhm.
read it out loud,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then I find that I've chosen a word that I really like and I've used it 6 times in 2 pages.
Right, right,
Right.
right.
I've got 3 sentences starting he, or I've got every sentence starting with a preposition. And sometimes I'll just count, do the little word count thing. It's like, oh my God, that's a 40 word sentence. And sometimes you can bring it down to just a word that then that really pops, and it keeps people engaged. Obviously, the director of the FBI is probably going to have a little bit different category vocabulary that he or she than my mafia guy, or my mafia fixer guy is going to have a different tone and whatever a voice in his way of talking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that makes a big difference. Now I love words.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had beta readers tell me, you need to change this word because I read that and I have no idea what that means. I'm like, yeah, but it's a really cool word. It's really,
Uh-huh.
really
Uh-huh.
cool. I
Right,
love these
right, right, right.
words. They're so much fun to use. And I think, no,
Yeah.
so then I have to go back and change it so that the last thing I want to do is bring somebody out of that world that I've worked so hard to create for them to be in.
Right, right, right. Yeah. I mean, but
So
but what a discipline, to just keep minding the bottom line, because of course,
yeah, it's
um, of course, as storytellers, we love to have fun too, right? And
right.
fun
Exactly.
creates authenticity and engagement, but at the same time, it's like, well, if my fun is taking priority over,
Right.
the fun that the audience is going to have with
Yeah.
it,
It's more
okay,
important for them to have fun, you know.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Darn it. Um,
Right.
who are some writers that you feel influence your work?
Oh gosh, I really thought a lot about that. Quite a few actually. One in particular, Joan Hall Hovey. She's a Canadian author that writes in the more or less the horror genre.
Hmm.
But I did a training thing through Windhill Writing School, and it was all online. But I would write scenes and she would critique them. And that was my class, so to speak. She really taught me a lot. She taught me how important point of view is and how to set the
Mm-hmm.
point of view and how to keep it. How to also set a person in the reader into it. Just for example, when you're writing, talking about the cold air that slaps you in the face when you step outside, or the drink that you spill on your hand, the cold drink you spill on your hand, or you're putting your hands into fur-lined gloves. I mean, just little things. She said they're really little things. That's what sets the scene. That's what puts people there. Or the
Right.
sunlight that comes through the window and you can see the dust motes, things that just put a person there. Anyway,
Right.
so she was a really important one for me, and I just love her to death. She taught me so much. Brad Thor, David Baldacci, of course, Tom Clancy, James Patterson. Oh gosh, Nora Roberts, Dean Koontz. I love Dean Koontz books.
Hmm.
And then going further back because I'm old. Dick Francis, Mary Stewart, Mary Higgins Clark, Phyllis Whitney. I read their books when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Great, great, scary mystery authors. Fletcher Nebel, Michael Crichton.
Hmm.
I could really go on, but
Well,
those
I
are
mean, isn't it wonderful to not only have your heroes, but also ones that you can not only enjoy but work with, right? And
oh
take so
yeah.
much instruction from.
And
Um, yeah.
actually reading all of them, they're all so talented and amazing to me that it's like taking a class when I
Mm,
read their stories.
mm,
It's taught me better ways to turn a phrase,
mm,
better ways to do dialogue to make it more natural. Just all those things you soak up like a sponge, when you're reading. And
mm.
there are authors that
Yeah.
don't work for me, and I have to just put the books aside because it affects my mind. It's not,
Mm.
yeah, it's just different.
Yeah. Well, again, sort of like your work with characters, it's like there's so much out there anyway.
Right,
It's yeah, it's not going to be a huge loss if you close one door because usually three others are going to open anyway. Um,
right.
Now, have you ever listened? First of all, what's your experience with audiobooks?
Well, I love audiobooks, and I'm doing Audible right now, and I do another one called Chirp Books.
Hmm.
And I love, it's just when I'm doing something outside or I'm busy work, then that's when I can listen. And I love it. I love them. My Dick Francis author, I've listened to all of his books on
Mm,
audiobook,
mm.
almost all of them, and I've read all of them. So, but yeah, I love a good mystery or thriller. Sometimes a cozy mystery, depends on what I'm in the mood for.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Otherwise, a good thriller, it's just, yeah, they're fun.
Yeah. And I mean, isn't it wonderful that they're so accessible these days? Because I'm sure that you remember, because I remember, the days of books on tape, which were literally
Yes.
on tape, right? And
Yeah.
that would just be something for the road trip, right? Where
Right.
you'd have
Exactly.
that giant cereal box size,
Uh-huh.
plastic collection with about like 10
Yep.
different tape cassettes.
Yep.
And that
Shove
would
them in when you head out.
Yep, exactly. But now, I mean, it's just everywhere. Just
Yeah.
you just can access it just instantly.
Oh, they're all, I just listen to them all on my phone, while
Mhm.
I'm wandering around. It's
Yep.
crazy. Yeah. Love
Same
it.
here. Same here. Um, well, and when you have listened to audiobooks, have you ever heard any that you have already read visually?
Yeah, specifically the good old Dick Francis books. They're all about horse racing in the UK, some element of the horse racing industry. And I love horses, so they're really fun for me. And I've what I seem to gather from that is that they add more depth to the characters.
Mm. So when you get a really good narrator, that's what they
Oh
do.
yeah. Yeah. It makes a big difference.
Oh,
Yeah.
isn't that wonderful? And yeah, well, terrific. Mary, thank you so much for joining. And I've already learned a tremendous amount, which can only enrich my own narration. Any final thoughts before we close up?
Oh, just that this is has been really fun. I'm enjoying doing this. It was really fun to hear actually hear my characters when you did
Mhm.
the narration.
Mhm.
I really got a kick out of that. I've listened to it a bunch of times and really enjoyed
Fantastic.
that.
Oh,
It's
wonderful.
fun.
Well,
Yeah, it's good.
well, terrific. Folks, that is Mary Yungeberg, and you can I'll have the spelling as well in the description of the video so that you can look her up and look up her wonderful series. And in the meantime, um, I'm Matt Haynes, and as your narrator, I hope that my voice and your ears meet again real soon.
Thanks, Matt.